It's funny how every time I address criticism about X, ones that I agree and disagree with on his channel multiple times, and finally someone decides to make the blind fanboy accusations despite almost having months of Beyblade content where I'm constructively critical. But fine, since people just want me to be negative about Beyblade for the sake of being negative about Beyblade, let's get this over with. Now, because Brave Dran was banned from being used in the finale, Exu relied on Drawn Sword. And naturally, there is a lot of question marks about the fact that how Drawn Sword could be stronger than Drawn Brave, given all the defeats that Exu was able to deal with the hand wave being that he's actually not holding back, which raises way too many questions to consideration. What I would have done would be to just have Drawn Sword customized with elements of Drawn Dagger and Drawn Buster. That way, it's a combination of all of his bays he can't use besides Brave, which would actually be some sort of counteraction to the fact that Blast Pegasus was probably either supposed to be stronger than Drawn Brave or just as strong. That way, it's a combination of the unpredictability, so it doesn't make it feel like him being able to use Drawn Sword was enough to bridge the gap. I'm still not a big fan of Multi's rematch with Shigeru in Season 2 because Weiss Tiger's ability to counter attack, defense, and stamina wasn't used into consideration. Especially since Multi's stamina for Arc Wizard or Wizard Arc had a stronger use of it, and it would have been more interesting to see how Multi either avoided or countered the stamina blade and the attack blade, so make the win feel a lot more satisfying. I also feel like the centrifugal force of the effect in the anime especially could have been stronger shown and presented like it was in the manga. Like I said almost 9 to 10 months ago, Flame Cerberus, I had to research this, I found out came out in the toy line much earlier in the season before it was debuted in the manga and the anime. My solution, like I said in the video you're seeing on screen, was that they could have had a flashback showing, now that we have the full capabilities of the Beyblade, exactly some of Million's ability to use Flame Cerberus without giving us all the details until the match, and have shown us what Million did in order to beat Shigeru. Considering that he's strong enough to have a extra shoot or a hyper boost that can damage people despite being a stamina type, doing that would have been good enough. Or we could have seen Shigeru seemingly have the advantage, and then he's able to use his bit to perform the Extreme Dash and then the Extreme Dash and then the Hyper Boost, or the Hyper Boost versus the Extreme Dash. That way we would have gotten good setup for Million without knowing the full capabilities of his abilities until the anime episode and the chapter explained it. Might just be me, but I am personally not a fan of the fact that King did not get an upgrade for Season 3, and given the possibility that we are leaving X City, it's possible he's not getting another upgrade again. They can always do customization, but I doubt that's going to happen. Although I did hear he got Leon Fang, but I have not played the video game, so let me know there. Multi has the ability to use an Extreme Dash with her defense type Beyblades in Knight Lance and Male Knight. However, despite episode 20 being basically a chill episode where she was able to use it against Bird, she never uses the opportunity to have an Extreme Dash again, despite the fact that there are two battles, like her fight against Uni and her fight against Rex, where they definitely could have written the fight to either include it or have her either use it to win or have their opponent basically overcome it. Like I said before, I have issues in the fact that Chrome and Exu's battle in Season 3 in terms of choreography wasn't all that well handled, because instead of what they did in the manga where it was just Meteor Dragoon versus Drawn Strike, they made them use all of their Beyblades. And because that's basically 4 different combinations of Beyblades they can use to fight each other, 4 different Beyblade sets that each of them have, and that's enough for them to fight each other. Yeah, we've already seen some of these get the battles that they need. Meanwhile, Impact Drake was set up to have this huge match against Drawn Brave, and it never did. And now it's Meteor versus Strike. What I would have done was made it a clash of 2 rounds. First round, Impact versus Brave, which would result in a tie, proving that Chrome was right and that they would allow them to match. And then you have Meteor versus Strike, which would actually show off what Exy was talking about and the fact that he couldn't do this alone, since it was made only thanks to 9 joining the team. Takumi and the rest of Phalanx and Bariki and Genri all have their own unique Beyblades in the manga, but not only did the anime change 2 of theirs to be more standard and basic, none of them, especially Stone Mountain, never got an official release in real life, which is like, why not just release it in real life or just make a new Beyblade that's based on that one for him? This is a problem in both versions, and I know Gabe made a smaller video about this a couple months back. But yes, Omega did not use Aero Pegasus as much as she should have, and given that the anime changed the manga's only appearance of her beating Pendragon with it, I think she could have had at least 1 or 2 more battles with it, at least enough so that Persona could see what Aero was capable of, so they would know how to deal with it when it came to Blast. I have gone on the record at least 3 times on this channel explaining that I don't want X to only be relying on the extreme dashes and that more characters would benefit from having more special moves, hyper boosts, and extra shoots in order to make the fights more varied and interesting. One of the issues with Season 1 is part of the problem of why just having tournament arcs after tournament arcs in the same season of Beyblade isn't always healthy, because when you have that, it just ends up with the same characters doing the same things over and over again, and the matchups can get repetitive. That's why including things like the Shuffle Battle Fest in Season 1, or in Metal's case, having the Hades City for all the characters to basically reunite and take on like all the big threats together work. Because since we already have a foundation, we can try something new within the same season, given that we have enough time to know how the characters and the plot is going to operate. I might be unfair because I have not watched episode 130 subbed yet, but I still do not like the fact that 9's big win debut against 7 out of the cross siblings that she was able to defeat, being the only one she has been able to defeat that we've seen on screen so far, didn't have her avatar awaken like it did in the manga, where she used Apocalypse Requiem to defeat Heaven's Ring. And I would have liked to see that more, especially given that this is probably going to be the last time we see 9 battle and win against an opponent in the anime for a while. See, my problem with the Underground arc is different from everyone else's, because a bunch of people keep saying that they don't like how Season 2 and 3 in the manga didn't focus on the Underground arc. The thing is, with the Underground arc in the manga was only there to basically explain why someone could have replicas of Chrome's Beyblades, and why Ginro isn't involved in the mainland conflicts, even though it's basically revealed that the Underground is used with the connections in order to help out Zodiac in some degree and some of the more shadier people, but that's only fleshed out in the anime. My real problem is that Chrome in the anime goes to the Underground and we don't see what happens to him throughout it to make him decide that he wants to leave. Because it's a big shift in his character. He decides to want to leave and basically fight against the Future Pros later in Season 3, but we don't see it from his perspective. It also doesn't help that the Underground is a subplot. I don't have an issue with it not being the main arc yet, but I would like to see it as part of being the main arc for a season. I'm not criticizing the manga for it being a plot that it's not, but I am going to criticize the anime for not showing that part for Chrome's character, and I would like to see it be a proper subplot that the heroes have to dive into in the future. While I am glad Shieru eventually figured out how to do Dragonic Break Z, I am a little bit peeved, and by peeved I mean I want them to actually explore this later. The fact that if he doesn't get a new upgrade, Shelter Drake still has its defense and stamina combos, and given that Shelter Drake can do pretty well offensively and defensively, I would actually like to see him develop those more going forward. While Gigatani is the abusive boss of Pendragon, Doden is basically the enabler for his actions, and the fact that he doesn't even consider or question the treatment of Lord Shieru and even sometimes Shigeru is very questionable in and of itself. And yeah, he really needs to step up as a sponsor. Also in Season 2, people keep complaining that Tenka should have been the one to beat her mother, even though Tenka literally admitted that she needed X's help to beat her mother. Well, another scenario that I think they could have done was have Tenka do the rematch with Omega, but she actually uses parts of Exu's Sword Dran in order to make her offensive power much more dangerous and capable. And in the fight, you can basically just have the shadow of Exu as a positive example to what Chrome did when he had the Phantom Exu. That way you have a positive image of what it looks like from someone who cooperated with Exu the whole season versus someone whose obsession about being bonded with Exu caused him to develop a negative form that's presented as something that's symbiotic when in really it's possessive. Hell's Chain still doesn't have the name for an Extreme Dash that's actually unique to it. They just call it Extreme Dash. One of the issues that I have with the adaptation of Multi vs. Shigeru's final round at the end of season 1 and the first arc in the manga was that because they tried to adapt it into a best of 4 in terms of points, even though Multi performed at her very best, she still lost. And to sell the illusion that the last round was basically something she could have won, and given that the extreme finish resulted in a clash that resulted in an overfinish for both parties, I think at one point Multi should have gotten either 2 survivor finishes or an overfinish or a burst finish at one point so that it would have been 2 to 3. Then in the final round, when she does the extreme dash, that way, if she got a survivor finish, that means that the extreme dash would probably result in an extreme finish, which would net her the 3 points she needs to win. Or if she got an overfinish or a burst finish, her being able to knock them out with a overfinish or a burst finish would result in her getting the 4 points. All I'm saying is that it would just make the fight a lot more suspenseful and give more of the idea that Multi can win instead of it just being like a foregone conclusion. Leon Crest didn't get a hyper boost or extreme shoot despite the fact that season 1 gave him Guardian Beast/Beast Guard, and he didn't get a chance to even use it for Leon Crest until season 3. Like, you couldn't have introduced that in the second season more since he has a fair more fights compared to Burn. It's probably funny how I've complained about this almost every time I do a Beyblade X season 3 retrospective, but yes, Burn's arc needed more build-up, especially in the anime. Because in the manga, it comes out of nowhere, and in the anime, it gets build-up. But between the build-up and the episode where it happens, there's not enough focus. They could have done something like Zero threatened to buy out Yggdrasil Pharmaceuticals, and while some of the background heroes basically have to deal with that and stop Zero, it's Multi and Bird trying to talk some sense into him. Or have the fact that he sees that the heroes defeating the other Pro Bladers is only going to be a temporary solution since no one has to deal with 5 and no one has got ready to deal with 1. So his concerns is the fact that 1 is basically someone that's far ahead of someone like Exu and no one else could compare until Bird defeating him reminds him that Persona is a team. And even though at the time he doesn't think that way, Multi and Bird are the ones that are also lifting Exu to strive to be better, and Exu is also pushing them forward. That way would make Burn's decision become a lot more understandable, and it would make his return to the hero side feel a lot more natural. 8 is kind of the most boring out of the cross siblings, and for someone who we see first, he should have probably been the one that got a little bit more character development and actually interact with the rest of the Bladers outside of his family. How many times do I have to constantly bring up the fact that the Beyblade X anime is always going to be better than the manga, because not only did the manga go from being weekly to monthly, that also means that a lot of characters that you guys quote-unquote care about or think got snubbed or got development barely got anything to do in the manga. Sophie and Wales in the Metal manga weren't even Bladers, they were glorified butlers. The Justice 5 were just concept arts that got most of their redesigns reworked for when they debuted in the anime for the final arc of the show. Cisco doesn't have as much character development as he does in the anime, to the point where everything that he did against Joshua is rushed. The last fight he has is against Free, and it's mostly off screen because the whole point of the manga is only to focus on Vault. And some of the extra characters like in X who, get those extra battles in the anime to flesh them out and hype them up before they go up against the protagonist, they don't get those fights to hype them up. They just go up against the protagonists and most of the time lose. And I'm not going to blow up at anyone from who responded at least to the main video from yesterday, especially since my brain is still having a headache and I'm still exhausted from basically everything, including the copyright issues, the fact that the original intent for the special opening I had to put on unlisted because of the stupid copyright system. That why would you copyright something that was over 14 years ago that no one is ever going to use for a motivational speech of all things. But yeah, it is funny how I spent so many months dissecting Beyblade, talking about the anime, the manga, the pros, the cons, the issues, offering solutions, being constructively critical. Meanwhile, you have people who would rather waste their time harassing one of the writers on Twitter and doing all this nonsense, yelling about buzzwords, plot armor, fraud, and where people actually come up with actual engaging conversations to be had, suddenly either we're blind idiots or we're glazers. You see how stupid that comes across? And that's the problem. I can even make it a video where I address the whole criticism revolving the fantasy debate and the realism debate, while also criticizing the realistic aspects and the fantasy aspects of it, while also making sure to bring up the good points towards everyone that has a preference towards any of the 4 seasons. I can go into these long, complicated explanations, show you guys evidence, show you guys proof, bring up the conversations, and instead of doing that, we just result to people just wanting me to be angry. Is that what you guys want? Because like I said in the fantasy and realism debate, some of y'all actively say y'all want certain Beyblade content, and yet you don't consume it. You want people to be negative about the Beyblade community, about especially with Burst and X, and sometimes Metal, and yet y'all will support like one video where everyone will just shit on X or shit on Burst, and then y'all don't consume anything else. Like, that's what you guys want me to do as a content creator? Just be negative and just say bad things towards Beyblade every single time? Even though I'm pretty critical whenever I talk about Beyblade, and I have at least, 50 videos where I talk about something negative or issues that I have? Guys, just because you don't agree with someone does not mean that you have to be negative towards everything. You can dislike something and not have to shout it to the world and then get mad at someone else for pointing out that maybe that anger might be misguided, questionable, or has loopholes or mishaps in their logic. You want me to be negative and bring up a bunch of dumb bullshit talking points instead of me actually being constructively negative by pointing out actual issues and actually pointing out ways that it could have been improved, or if the situation isn't that big but are tweaks and things that could actually be helpful, for like Burst or Metal or G Revolution or X. Even when you offer actual suggestions and rooms of area for improvement. But no, people don't want to pay attention. They just rather listen to people yell about fraud, plot armor, and other nonsense for hours on end, and then act like it's an actual civil and reasonable discussion. Y'all want more forced negativity? People judging things without the full context, people taking things out of context, people regurgitating the same unfunny jokes and posts all over again without anything new or interesting to say? Fine, go consume it, but I don't have to put up with it unless you guys want me to change my channel to be exclusively about that. Anyway, that's my one unscripted rant/video that I get to do because I'm allowed to be a human being that has the right to express their frustrations without being a condescending dick too much. But yeah, follow Gabriel. He's a better content creator in terms of Beyblade than I'll ever be. Get him to 1,000 subs because he needs the support. I'm taking a break from talking about Beyblade, or at least for 24 hours. See you all probably tomorrow. Bye.